I've filmed 11 wars. I've watched things that I will not describe to you, because you didn't do anything to deserve carrying them around the way I do. I'm telling you this so you understand what kind of person I was when I met her. I was not a believer. I had been a believer once, a long time ago, and the galaxy had carefully and thoroughly cured me of it, war by war, and by the time I landed on Sereth, I was just a man with a camera and a cold place where the hope used to be. So when I tell you that a woman who looked too gentle to hold a rifle changed something in me on that mud-soaked dying world, understand that I am the worst possible person to be saying it, and that is exactly why you should believe me. Let me take you there, to Sereth, to the worst place I have ever stood, and the only place I ever saw something I'd call holy. But first I have to tell you how I got cold, because if you don't understand the cold, you won't understand what she thought. It happened on my fourth war. A world called Memnon, you won't have heard of it, almost no one has. The Combine ran my footage for 2 days and then a stock market story broke and Memnon vanished from the feeds forever. I was younger then. I still had the belief in me. I'd gotten into this work because I thought a camera could matter, that if you showed people the truth of a thing, the truth would move them, and the moving would change something. I really believed that. I want you to know I wasn't always a cynic. The cynicism was earned. On Memnon, there was a village. A small one in a valley, caught between 2 armies that didn't even particularly care about it. It just happened to be in the way. And I spent 3 weeks there filming the people in that village, getting to know them, an old couple who ran a grain mill, a girl of about 9 who followed me around asking about the stars I'd traveled between, a young man who was teaching himself to repair the village's one ancient water pump from a manual he couldn't fully read. I filmed all of it. I made them real. I told myself that if I made them real enough, if I got the footage good enough, when the armies came near, someone would care, someone would root around them. The truth of these specific human lives would be enough to bend the war an inch. The war did not bend an inch. It came through the valley on a gray morning and it did not even slow down. And I filmed that too, because that was the job, and I filed it. And the Combine ran it for 2 days, and the galaxy did not care. And the old couple and the girl who asked about stars and the young man with his water pump manual were simply gone, erased, a line item, a number. And I learned the thing that made me cold. I learned that the truth doesn't move anyone, that showing people the reality of suffering does not reduce the suffering by 1 gram, that the number is the only thing that's real and everything else, the names, the faces, the girl asking about stars, is just decoration the universe puts on top of arithmetic. I stopped making people real after Memnon. It hurt too much for no reason. I gave the Combine their blood and their numbers, and I kept my distance, and I told myself distance was wisdom. 7 more wars taught me the same lesson 7 more times. By the time I reached Sereth, I had it memorized. The number is the thing, nothing else is. You can see, maybe, why a soft-spoken medic telling me the number is never the thing landed on me, the way a stone lands on ice that's already cracked. My name doesn't matter much. People knew my footage more than my face. I filed dispatches from the frontier conflicts for one of the big human news combines, the kind of outlet that wants blood and heroes in 90-second packages, and I had long since stopped giving them heroes because I'd stopped believing heroes existed. I gave them blood. There was always plenty of that. Sereth was a border world, one of those unlucky planets that sits on a line 2 powers have both decided to want. It was a human colony, old, established, a few million people who farmed the gray-green river valleys and mined the highlands and had been minding their own business for 150 years. And then the Korlu came. You need to understand the Korlu to understand the siege, so let me describe them, because they frightened me in a way I'd thought I was past being frightened. The Korlu are an insectile people. Not in the small skittering way you might imagine. They stand taller than a human, chitin-armored, many-limbed, and they move with a horrible patient economy, never a wasted motion. But that's not the frightening part. The frightening part is their doctrine. The Korlu have made war the same way for 400,000 years, and they have refined it into something that is almost beautiful and entirely without mercy. They do not raid. They do not skirmish. The Korlu lay siege. They arrive at a world, they encircle it, and they close slowly, methodically, inevitably, like a fist closing in geological time. They have never lifted a siege. In 400,000 years, not once. When the Korlu surround your world, the only questions are how long you last and how many of you they let leave before the fist closes. They had surrounded Sereth, and the fist was closing. I came in on one of the last evacuation transports while the corridor was still open. The Korlu, by their own ancient and rigid honor code, leave a single corridor open during the early phase of a siege, a chance for the population to leave before the closing. They are not cruel for cruelty's sake. They are simply implacable. Leave through the corridor and live. Stay, and be part of the world they are closing their fist around. It is, in its way, the most honest threat in the galaxy. The transport came down through a sky the color of a bruise. Sereth's weather is bad at the best of times, and these were not the best of times. There was a thin, cold rain falling that never seemed to stop the whole time I was there, the kind that gets into everything, that turns the ground to a gray sucking mud that pulls at your boots like it wants you to stay and die with the planet. The landing field was chaos. Tens of thousands of people, packed up against the loading zones, clutching what they could carry, the corridor evacuation in its frantic final days. Children crying. The thin, endless rain, and over all of it, on the horizon in every direction, the lights. The Korlu siege lines. A ring of cold blue-white light all the way around the sky, closing. You could see it move if you watched long enough. You could see your world getting smaller. I spent my first 2 days on Sereth doing what I always did. Walking the evacuation zone with my camera, gathering the despair into 90-second packages. It was a good harvest, if you can call it that. The desperation on Sereth was the purest I'd ever filmed. There was a man at the loading zones who would not let go of a chair, an ordinary kitchen chair, wooden, nothing, and the transport handlers were telling him there was no room for furniture, only people, and he kept saying his wife had built it with her own hands before she died, and if he left it then, she was really gone. They took it from him in the end, and he got on the transport with his hands empty and his face like a collapsed building. I filmed it. The Combine would love it. I hated myself the practiced amount and kept walking. Around the edges of the chaos were the Vesh. I should mention them because they tell you how the galaxy regarded this whole affair. The Vesh are a merchant species, gas breathers in pressure suits, and they had a small trade enclave on Sereth, and during the siege they did what the Vesh always do, they monetized it. They were selling places in the transport queue, forged priority documents, whatever they could broker. They'd set up little kiosks at the edge of the dying, and they were extracting the last wealth of doomed people in exchange for a better chance at the corridor. It was legal, technically. The Vesh are always legal, technically. One of them clicked at me through its translator that I should be ashamed to film honest commerce, and I thought, there it is, that's the whole galaxy in one sentence. I got close to a Korlu siege warden once in those first days. They posted observers at the edge of the corridor, motionless sentinels watching the evacuation. I walked up to one with my camera expecting to be warned off. It didn't warn me off. It simply watched me with eyes like wet black glass, utterly still, and let me film it because I was beneath its concern the way a particular insect is beneath your concern when you are building a house. There was no hatred in it. That was what chilled me. I have filmed soldiers full of hate. Hate, I understand. Hate is human. The warden had no hate at all. It had something worse. Completion. The serene completion of a thing that has done this 10,000 times and knows exactly how it ends and feels nothing either way. Standing in front of it was like standing in front of weather. How do you tell a people like that no? You don't. That's the point of them. Nobody ever has. I'd filmed evacuations before. I set up to film this one with the cold professional distance I'd built over 11 wars. Get the crying child. Get the old man looking at the lights. Get the 90 seconds of blood and despair the combine wanted, file it, move on to the next dying place. That was the job. That was all it was anymore. And then I saw the medical station, and the gentle woman who ran it, and everything I thought I knew started to come apart. Her name was Telemaro. I almost didn't film her at first, because she didn't fit the story I was there to tell. She was small and soft-spoken, perhaps in her 40s, with a round, kind face and tired eyes and hands that never seemed to stop moving, always doing something, dressing a wound, holding a frightened child, steadying an old woman's shoulder. She ran a field medical station at the edge of the evacuation zone, a sagging prefab tent in the endless rain, and she moved through the chaos with a calm that I found almost offensive, because I knew what was coming for this world and I couldn't understand how anyone could be calm in front of it. She was, to look at her, the least warlike person I had ever seen. If you'd asked me to pick, out of those tens of thousands of desperate people, the one least suited to face the Korlu, I'd have pointed at her. She looked like someone's aunt. She looked like she should be baking something. She had a way of tilting her head when she listened to a frightened person that made them stop being quite so frightened. And I filmed that actually, almost by accident, a child screaming, and Tella crouching down and tilting her head and the child going quiet. And I remember thinking it was a nice shot, a human interest filler, nothing more. I didn't know yet that I was filming the most dangerous person on Sereth. I want to be careful with that word, dangerous, because you'll think I mean she was a hidden soldier, that the gentle medic was secretly some kind of killer. She wasn't. That's not the story. The thing that made Telemaro dangerous to the Korlu was something they had no defense against precisely because it wasn't violence at all, and I didn't understand it until the day she walked out toward the siege lines, and I'll get to that. The thing I noticed first was that she wasn't leaving. The corridor was still open. Anyone could go. And the evacuation was working, slowly, terribly, but working, the transports lifting load after load of people up and out before the fist closed. Everyone with sense was getting on those transports, and Telemaro was not getting on a transport. She was setting up more cots. I asked her about it. I had my camera down, it wasn't an interview, I just couldn't understand it and the not understanding nagged at me. I said something like, "You know the corridor's going to close. You know what happens then." She was rolling a bandage. She didn't look up. "I know." "So why are you setting up more cots?" And she said in that soft, even voice, "Because not everyone can make the transports. The injured, the very old, the ones too sick to move, they can't get to the loading zones in time. Someone has to be with them." She tied off the bandage. "I'm not going to put them on a cot and then leave them on it." I'd heard this kind of thing before. 11 wars. There's always someone who says they'll stay, and usually they don't, or they do, and it's a small pointless death that I film and file and forget. So I said, and I'm not proud of this, but I'm telling you the truth, I said, "That's very noble. It won't matter. The Korlu close the fist and everyone inside it dies. You staying doesn't change the number. It just adds one." She looked up at me then, and there was no anger in her face, which somehow made it worse. Just a kind of patient sadness, the way you'd look at someone who'd been hurt so badly they'd forgotten things were ever otherwise. "You've seen a lot of wars," she said. "It wasn't a question." 11. "And you think the only thing that matters is the number." She went back to her cots. "I used to think that too. A long time ago. Then I learned that the number isn't the thing. The number's never the thing." She didn't explain. She just kept working in the rain, setting up beds for people everyone else had already counted as dead. I filmed her doing it. I told myself it was for the human interest package. The truth is I couldn't stop watching her, and I didn't know why. I stayed at the medical station after that. Told myself it was for the story. The story was at the loading zones, and I knew it, and I stayed anyway. I started to learn the people who'd refused to leave. They weren't who I expected. I'd assumed the ones who stayed would be the broken ones, the ones who'd given up. They weren't. There was an old woman named Sereth who was too frail for the transports and knew it, and who spent her days helping Tella roll bandages with hands that shook, because, she told me, if I'm going to die, I'd rather die useful than die waiting. There was a man whose legs didn't work, in a powered chair the colony couldn't spare room for on a transport, and he'd appointed himself the station's record keeper, writing down every name, every person who came through in a paper ledger because, he said, somebody should know we were here. There was a boy of maybe 14 who wouldn't leave because his grandfather couldn't, and Tella had tried 3 times to get him on a transport, and 3 times he'd come back, and she'd finally stopped trying and just put a job in his hands instead. That's the thing I noticed about Tella. She never wasted breath telling a person they were wrong to stay. She'd offer them the transport once honestly, and if they refused, she didn't argue and she didn't praise them either. She just folded them into the work, gave them a task, made them part of the thing she was building in that sagging tent in the rain. She was assembling something out of the people everyone else had written off. I didn't have a word for it then. I think now it was a kind of dignity. She was making sure that whatever happened, these people would meet it as people who mattered to each other, and not as a number waiting to be subtracted. One night the rain had eased to a mist, which on Sereth passed for clear weather. I sat with her outside the tent while she drank something hot out of a dented cup. The siege lights were closer than they'd been when I arrived. You could feel the closing now, like a pressure in the chest. I asked her, finally, the question I'd been carrying. You said you used to think the number was the only thing that mattered. What changed? She was quiet for a while. The mist drifted. I was on a hospital ship, she said. Years ago, different war. We took on more wounded than we could treat, and there's a thing they teach you for that: triage. You sort people. The ones who'll live without you, the ones who'll die no matter what you do, and the ones in the middle where your help actually changes the outcome. You're supposed to spend everything on the middle. It's the math. It saves the most lives. She turned the cup in her hands. And it's correct. I'm not going to tell you it isn't. I ran triage for a year. I saved a lot of people with that math. So you believe in the number? I believe in the number, she agreed. But I learned what the number costs, because triage means you walk past people. The ones who'll die no matter what, you mark them and you move on, because stopping for them is stealing from the middle. And I did it. For a year I walked past dying people to do the math, and the math was right. She looked at me. And one night I sat with one of them anyway, just one, a boy I'd marked. I knew it changed nothing. I knew the number. I sat with him anyway because I couldn't stand to walk past one more. And I held his hand while he went. And it didn't save him. It didn't change the number by 1. Then why? Because it changed him, she said. He didn't die as a thing I walked past. He died as a person someone stayed for. The number was exactly the same, but that's not nothing. I've been told my whole career that it was nothing, that anything outside the math was sentiment, decoration. Her voice was very steady. It isn't nothing. It's the only thing the math can't touch. The number tells you how many. It never tells you who. And in the end, who is the only part anybody actually lives inside. I didn't say anything. I was thinking about a girl on Memnon who'd asked me about the stars, and how I'd told myself for years that filming her had changed nothing, had been decoration, had been a mistake I wouldn't make again. Sitting in the mist on a dying world, I wasn't so sure anymore. The Korlu sent a herald on the day the corridor was scheduled to close. This too is part of their ancient honor. Before the final closing, a Korlu herald comes forward under a sign of parley to give the formal last warning, to announce that the corridor will close at such an hour, that any who remain will be inside the fist, and that the Korlu bear them no malice but will not stop. It is a ritual 400,000 years old. It has been performed at the death of 1,000 worlds. The herald came to the edge of the evacuation zone in the gray rain, a tall Korlu officer, chitin gleaming wet, flanked by 2 siege wardens, and around them a cleared space because everyone, human and otherwise, instinctively backed away from the things that were about to inherit our world. The herald spoke through a translator construct in a flat clicking cadence. It announced the hour of the closing. It announced that mercy had been extended in the form of the corridor, and that this mercy was now ending. It announced that the world of Sereth now belonged to the closing of the fist. And the crowd of the doomed, the ones who hadn't made the transports, the injured and the old and the ones who'd stayed for them, went very quiet, because this was the end. This was the formal pronouncement of their deaths, and there was nothing anyone could say to 400,000 years of implacable siege. Except that someone did say something. A small figure stepped out of the crowd into the cleared space, into the rain, in front of the Korlu herald and its siege wardens. No weapon, no armor, just a soft-spoken medic with a round, kind face and tired eyes and hands that finally, for once, were still. Telemaru. And she looked up at the towering insectile war thing that had come to pronounce the death of her world. And she said, in that quiet, even voice that somehow carried through the rain, "No, I don't think it does." The herald's translator clicked, paused. The Korlu, 400,000 years of unbroken siege, tilted its great armored head down at the small human woman who had just told it no. And for the first time in that whole gray siege, something happened that the Korlu had no ritual for. It hesitated. What she said next, and what she did, and why a gentle medic with no weapon made the most implacable war machine in the galaxy stop closing its fist, that's the rest of the story. And I filmed all of it, every second. It's the only footage I've ever shot that I've never sold to anyone, because some things you don't put a price on. But I'll tell it to you for free, because the galaxy should know what happened on Sereth. No, I don't think it does. That's what she said to 400,000 years of unbroken siege. 5 words, soft-spoken in the rain, and the Korlu herald stopped. I had my camera up. I want you to know that even then, even in that moment, the old reflex held. I filmed it. But somewhere in the filming I had stopped being a man with a camera and become just a man, watching. Because what was happening in front of me did not fit anything I had ever filmed. And I think on some level I already knew I was witnessing the only thing that had ever mattered. Let me tell it slowly. It deserves to be told slowly. The herald tilted its great armored head down at her. The translator construct between them clicked and hummed, processing, and there was a pause that went on too long, and in that pause I understood that the Korlu had no script for this. Their ritual had a place for many responses. It had a place for weeping, for pleading, for defiance, for curses, for someone rushing the wardens with a weapon. They'd have killed that person without a flicker. 400,000 years of practice. The ritual could absorb all of it. It did not have a place for a small, unarmed woman saying, "I don't think it does," calmly, as though correcting a minor error on a form. The translator finally produced the herald's response, flat and clicking. The closing is not a matter of opinion. It is the structure of the world now. The corridor ends. Those who remain are inside. This is not cruelty. It is the shape of what is. I understand the shape of it, Tella said. I'm not arguing with the shape. I'm telling you that closing the fist on this world is going to cost you something, and I don't think you've counted it, and I think you're a people who count things very carefully. So I'd like to help you count. The herald went still, the Korlu stillness, the weather stillness. Explain. And she did. I have thought about what she did next for years, and I have come to believe it was the bravest and the cleverest thing I ever saw. And the strange part is that it was both of those things precisely because it was not a trick. She did not bluff the Korlu. She did not threaten them. She did not have 11 ships or a hidden fleet or a buried secret. She had the truth, and she had understood something about the Korlu that nobody else had bothered to understand, because everyone else was too busy running. You've never lifted a siege, she said. 400,000 years, I know your record. Everyone knows your record. It's the whole reason you frighten people. The fist always closes. You're proud of that. It's not vanity. I don't think you do vanity, but it's something like honor. The unbroken record is the thing you are. It is, the herald agreed. The translator gave the word a kind of weight. And you keep that record, Tella went on, by being implacable, by never ever stopping. Because the moment you stop once, the moment a single world learns that the Korlu can be made to lift a siege, your record breaks, and the fear breaks with it, and you become just another large army that can sometimes be turned away. The whole thing rests on never stopping. That's why you can't show mercy. Mercy is a precedent, and a precedent is a crack, and a crack is the end of the only thing that makes you the Korlu. She paused. I have that right, don't I? The herald did not answer, which was its own answer. So here's what I think you haven't counted, Tella said, and her soft voice carried in the rain, and the doomed crowd behind her had gone utterly silent, and even the Vesh in their kiosks had stopped their commerce to listen. You think the danger is in stopping. You think the crack comes from lifting a siege, but you've got it backwards. The crack is already here and you brought it, and you're about to make it worse. Inside this evacuation zone, she said, there are 416 people who cannot leave. I know the number because I've counted them. The injured, the old, the ones whose bodies won't make the transports. They're not soldiers. There's not a weapon among them. They're a frail old woman who rolls bandages with shaking hands. A man who keeps a record of names in a paper book so somebody will know we were here. A boy of 14 who wouldn't leave his grandfather. 416 people, whose only crime is that they couldn't run fast enough. The herald's eyes, wet black glass, did not move. You close the fist, Tella said. You're not going to fight an army. There's no army left. You're going to close it on 416 helpless people, and you're going to do it in front of him. She gestured at me, at my camera. He films wars for the whole galaxy. He's filming this right now. And I think you know the way I know that there's a difference between a siege and a slaughter, and the difference is whether the thing inside the fist could ever have fought back. A siege of soldiers is honor. The Korlu have 400,000 years of honor, but closing your fist on 416 unarmed, sick, and elderly people, on camera, for the galaxy to see, that's not honor. That's the day the Korlu became the thing that murders the helpless. And that is the precedent that breaks you. I felt the air change. I swear I did. You're afraid lifting a siege would make you look weak, she said, softer now, almost gentle. But it won't be remembered as weakness. Not this one. It'll be remembered as the day the Korlu were strong enough to choose. Any animal can close a fist. It takes something more to look at 416 helpless people and open the hand, not because you were forced, but because you decided that murdering the defenseless wasn't a victory worth having. That's the record I'd be afraid of breaking if I were you, not the unbroken sieges, the unbroken honor. And you're about to break it on a tent full of dying grandmothers, and you haven't counted what that costs you, and I came out here to make sure you counted it before you did something you can't take back. The silence after that was the loudest thing on Sereth. The herald stood motionless for a long, long time. The rain came down. Behind it, the two siege wardens were utterly still, and I realized I was holding my breath, and I realized everyone was, the whole doomed crowd, 416 people and a war correspondent and a handful of Vesh, all holding their breath while an ancient war thing did something its kind had perhaps never done in 400,000 years. It thought about it. When the translator finally spoke, the herald's voice had changed. I don't know how to describe it except that the completion I'd seen in the warden, the serene certainty, wasn't in it anymore. You presume, it said, to understand Korlu honor. You are a soft species. You run. Your kind has no record to break. That's true, Tella said simply. We run. We're not ashamed of it. Running means we think the people are worth more than the ground. She tilted her head, that small gesture I'd seen calm a screaming child. But I'm not asking you to be human. I'd never insult you like that. I'm asking you to be Korlu, really Korlu, the honorable kind, not the kind that murders the helpless because it's afraid of what stopping might look like. You've spent 400,000 years being implacable, because you thought implacability was your honor. I'm telling you it was never the implacability. It was that you only ever closed your fist on things that could close back. Keep that and you're still the Korlu. Lose it here today on these people and you're just weather. Weather doesn't have honor. Weather doesn't get to be proud. The herald looked at her. Then it looked slowly past her at the sagging medical tent, at the faces in the rain, at the old woman Sepha who had come to the edge of the crowd and was watching with her shaking hands folded, at the boy with his grandfather, at the man in the powered chair with his paper ledger of names. It looked at them for a long time, as people, maybe for the first time as people. And then it did something that I have never been able to fully explain, and that the Korlu themselves have never officially acknowledged, and that I have the only footage of in the entire galaxy. It turned to its siege wardens, and it gave an order in the clicking Korlu tongue that the translator did not render, and then it spoke once more to Tella, and the translator gave us its words, and they were these. The closing will pause. I must carry your counting to the siege mother. I do not promise the answer you wish, but I will not be the herald who closed the fist on the helpless while the question was still being counted. That much, at least, is mine to refuse. And it turned, and it walked back toward the siege lines through the gray rain, to carry a soft-spoken medic's arithmetic to whatever ancient authority commanded the Korlu. And behind it, on a dying world, 416 people who had been counting the hours until their deaths suddenly had something none of them had dared to hold for weeks. A pause, a question still being counted, a chance. But a pause is not a reprieve, and the siege mother had not yet spoken, and what came back from the Korlu lines the next day, and what it asked of Tella Morrow in return, was harder than anything she'd faced in the rain. That's the last part of the story. The pause lasted 19 hours. I know because I didn't sleep through any of them. Nobody did. You can't sleep inside a pause like that, a whole world holding its breath. 416 people who had made their peace with dying suddenly handed the unbearable thing, which is hope. Hope is heavier than despair. Despair you can set down. Hope you have to carry, and it has teeth and it gnaws. I watched people who had been calm for weeks come apart in those 19 hours, because calm is easy when there's nothing left to lose, and Tella had given them all something to lose again. She moved among them through that long night the way she did everything, steady, tilting her head when someone needed to be heard. She didn't promise them anything. I noticed that. She never once said we're going to be all right. She said we'll know soon, and whatever the answer is, we'll meet it together. And somehow that was stronger than a promise, because a promise can be broken and what she offered them couldn't. I asked her, somewhere in the small gray hours, if she thought it had worked. She was quiet for a while. I don't know, she said. I told them the truth, that's all I had. The truth doesn't always work. A small, tired smile. You taught me that a little. 11 wars. You said the truth doesn't move anyone. I did say that. I hope you're wrong, she said. I've been betting my whole life that you're wrong. I'd like to find out before I die which of us had it right. The herald returned at dawn. The rain had stopped, actually stopped, for the first time since I'd landed, and a thin gray light was coming over the highlands, and the siege lights had gone strangely dim against it. The herald came alone this time. No wardens. It walked into the cleared space where Tella waited, and the whole zone gathered at a distance to hear, and I had my camera up, and the translator construct clicked to life. I carried your counting to the siege mother, the herald said. I will tell you what she said, and then I will tell you what she requires, and the requiring is hard, and you may refuse it, and if you refuse it, the fist will close. Understand this before you hear it. I understand, Tella said. The siege mother heard your counting. She agreed that there is no honor in closing the fist on the helpless, and that to do so on the record before the galaxy would break something older and truer than our unbroken sieges. In 400,000 years no one had counted this for us. We had not counted it for ourselves. A pause. You were not wrong, soft one. This is the first time a Korlu siege has been counted by the besieged in a way the siege mother could not answer. She is troubled, honestly troubled. This does not happen. The herald's head tilted, an almost human gesture, perhaps learned in the last day. But the siege mother cannot simply lift the siege. You understood our true fear correctly, but not completely. If the Korlu lift a siege because a soft species asked, then every world will learn that the fist opens to asking, and our record breaks the way you said the slaughter would break it from the other side. We are caught, soft one, between two cracks. To close the fist is to become weather. To open it for the asking is to become nothing. The siege mother has found the only path between, and it runs through you, and it will cost you. The siege will lift, the herald said. Sereth will be released. The 416 will live, and the world will remain human, and the Korlu will withdraw. This the siege mother grants. A sound went through the crowd, not a cheer, something rower than a cheer, the sound people make when a thing they didn't dare want is suddenly real. But, the herald said, and the sound died, it cannot be recorded as the Korlu lifting a siege. That precedent we cannot survive. It must be recorded as something else. It must be recorded that the Korlu took a hostage, a single life, freely given in exchange for the 416. A life of honor surrendered to the siege mother to be carried back to the Korlu worlds and held. Not killed, held, for the rest of its natural span. So that the record reads not the Korlu were turned away, but the Korlu were paid a price they judged sufficient. A siege not lifted but bought. That the record can hold. That we survive. The herald looked at Tella. The siege mother named the price. The life must be the one who counted us. The one who walked out unarmed and made an ancient people stop. Such a life is worth 416 in the reckoning of the siege mother, and worth a siege. No other life will balance the ledger. A pause. You, soft one, the price is you. You will leave Sereth and your people and your world, and you will go to the Korlu worlds, and you will not return, and in exchange 416 people live and your world stands. This is the requiring. You may refuse it. The silence came down again, and I understood, with a cold that went all the way through me, that the Korlu had not just found a path between their two cracks. They had found out whether Telemaro meant it. Because anyone can make a clever argument when the cost falls on someone else. Tella had counted who instead of how many, and now the Korlu were asking her, in front of everyone, in front of my camera, did you mean it? Are you one of the people, or are you just good at talking about them? Will you walk past the dying boy, or will you sit down and hold his hand knowing it changes nothing for you and everything for him? She didn't hesitate. That's the part I can't get past, even now. She did not hesitate for 1 second. Yes, she said. Just that, yes. The way you'd answer a question about the weather. And then, because she was Tella, because she never wasted a chance to fold one more person into mattering, she turned to the crowd, to the 416, and she said, Don't make this a sad thing. Listen to me. This is the best trade I'll ever make in my life. One of me for all of you. I ran triage for a year and never once got a trade that good. Her voice caught just slightly, the only crack I saw. Sepha, keep rolling the bandages, there'll be others who need them. And you, the man with the ledger, you keep the names. Add mine to the book. Write that we were here. Write that we counted. She looked at the boy and his grandfather and didn't say anything to them at all. Just reached out and touched the boy's shoulder once. Then she turned to me. You're going to film all of this, she said. I know you are, it's who you are, and that's good, I want you to. But I need you to do something with it that you haven't done since whatever war made you cold. She looked right into the lens, into me. I need you to make us real, not the number. Not 416 saved and one given. Make them people. The girl who asked about the stars, you never said her name, but I know there was one, I can see it on you. Don't do to us what you did to her. Make us real so it means something. The truth only moves people if you let it have a face. She almost smiled. Bet your whole life I'm right about that. The way I bet mine. And then she walked across the cleared space, toward the herald, toward the siege lines and the world she would never see again. In the thin gray light with the rain finally stopped. A small soft-spoken medic with a round, kind face, who had looked too gentle to be a warrior, walking willingly into the fist so that 416 people would never have to. The Korlu lifted the siege. The lights went out around the sky over the next 3 days, the fist opening for the first time in 400,000 years, recorded forever as a price paid rather than a mercy given, because that was the only shape the Korlu could survive, and Telemaro understood that, and gave them that shape with her own life as the clay. Sereth stands today, human-free. There are children there now who were born after the siege, who play in the gray-green river valleys and will never know how close the fist came, or that a woman they never met bought their whole world for the price of herself. The 416 lived. Sereth I lived 2 more years and rolled bandages until the end. The man kept his ledger. It's in a museum on Sereth now, open to the last page where the final name is written in his careful hand. Telemaro. She counted us. She was here. The boy is grown now. He has children of his own. He named his daughter Tella. And me, the cold man with the camera, the one who'd learned on a dozen dying worlds that the truth moves no one, and the number is the only real thing. I did what she asked. I didn't sell the footage. Not to the Combine, not to anyone, not for any price, because the moment you put a price on it, it becomes a number again, and she died to prove the number isn't the thing. Instead, I made them real, all of them. I spent the rest of my career, what was left of it, telling the story of Sereth the way Tella told me to, not 416 saved and 1 given, but Sereth I with her shaking hands, and the man with his ledger, and the boy and his grandfather, and a girl on a world called Memnon who once asked me about the stars and whose name I will tell you now, because I finally learned the lesson Tella died teaching me. Her name was Anya, and I should have said it years ago. The truth doesn't move anyone, I used to say. I was wrong. I was wrong on 11 worlds, and it took a 12th to teach me. The truth moves people, but only when it has a face, only when you're brave enough to make it real and stop hiding behind the number and say the names out loud. She looked too gentle to be a warrior, and she was right about that. She wasn't a warrior, not the kind with a weapon, not the kind I'd spent my life filming. She was something the galaxy had no word for and the Korlu had no defense against. She was a woman who counted who when everyone else counted how many, and who, when the universe finally called her bluff and asked if she meant it, said yes without hesitating, the way you'd answer a question about the weather. The strongest person I ever filmed never threw a punch. She just refused to let a single soul be only a number. And in the end, that turned out to be the one thing in all the galaxy that 400,000 years of unbroken siege could not close its fist around.